Hello, wandering souls of the internet, and welcome to Purgatory Podcast. Today's episode, we're in episode 2 right now, which is kind of crazy. Flair, how are you feeling on episode 2?
I'm feeling a little nervous. This story is definitely I don't really know it that well, unfortunately. I've skimmed
Really?
around. I've seen a lot of stuff about it, but I haven't actually seen or read the entire story like start to finish. So this is going to be an experience for me.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually kind of crazy to me because this story for me was huge when I was like 14 maybe. So like I used to tell this story all the time. My friends used to beg me on the field like, Daisy, tell me the story, tell me the story. So I'm really excited. So today's episode is about the Russian sleep experiment. Now, this is another creepypasta that we're going to be covering, and is widely well known, actually, I think, amongst the creepypasta community, as a lot of people have deemed it to be one of the most famous stories. So I have a little bit of backstory, which I am happy to provide right now. So it's actually so crazy that I get to talk about it and get to deep dive into it as well. So, the story of the Russian sleep experiment recounts an experiment set in 1947 at a covert Soviet test facility, and this is where scientists gave test subjects a stimulant gas that would prevent sleep. Now, this story became very popular when it was originally posted. It was actually considered by some to be the greatest and most shared creepypasta story ever made. Dread Central's Josh Milliken has called it one of the most shocking and impactful urban legends of the internet age. People often debate if the story is real or not. This is actually, so a little side note on my backstory. I used to tell my friends it was a true story. I used to tell them that this was real and that it was just like hidden by like the government and the media and all this kind of things. I try to freak them out.
I mean,
Which
it's
I
a
thought was
very
really
realistic story as well. I mean, it's very
Oh yeah.
graphic, so it's not for everybody. But I definitely, whenever I heard like a little bit of it, and I saw the image associated with it, I genuinely did think it was real, because I mean, unfortunately, it is a really realistic thing that could very well happen.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of stories out there that are pretty similar in gruesomeness, but I think this one, just because of the outcome, I think that's probably the scariest part of it. But we'll
Yeah,
get to all
it's
that here
definitely.
soon for sure.
Oh, 100%. There's a lot to cover here, and also, before I just finish the tiny little bit of backstory, I do want to preface this is kind of a bit of a trigger warning on this story. It's it's a bit
Not for the faint of
graphic.
heart. Yeah,
No,
definitely. If
it's
you want a lighter story, definitely go check out our other video on the Purgatory Podcast. We covered Hero Brian last time. But if you are, I would say, if you're not ready for a lot of gore, depiction of gore, descriptions of violence, do not proceed, please. We want your safety. Mental health is definitely important. If you're in a bad spot, please click off. But if you're up for that kind of stuff and you're weird like us and you want to hear about it, please join us on this journey.
100%. So the last little bit of backstory that I've got is that, so obviously people were debating whether it was real or not, but alongside the story was often an unsettling image of a grotesque and emaciated human-like figure. Now we're going to put it on screen for those watching on YouTube. You'll be able to see the picture that goes along with it. It is pretty gory. I did actually used to think it was a real person.
And just looking at it, I mean, it almost looks mummified, right?
Yeah. The
It's
way
like
it's like turned to look at the camera, it's
it's
really
unsettling.
eerie.
It almost feels like something you would see on the edge of your bed at like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It almost gives me the Rake vibes, It's
Yeah.
Ooh, it just gives me chills. I know the first time I saw it, it was the sunken in eyes, the exposed teeth, the bony figure. It's one of those things that you don't obviously think that it could hurt you, right? It doesn't look physically imposing, but it's
Yeah.
almost like Uncanny Valley. It's
Yes, 100%. It is implied that what you see from the picture of the emaciated human is implied to be what the test subjects ended up looking like after the testing. But in reality, so everyone can be put at ease, it is just a life-size animatronic Halloween prop that is called Spasm. So it isn't real, it is completely fake.
I don't know if that makes it any better, especially after the FNAF craze that happened a couple of years ago. But that's, holy shit, like that I mean, just the fact that thing actually exists is nuts to me. I would love to have this thing like in my yard at Halloween. Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. Like just having this thing like spaz around and scare people. I feel like that'd be so funny.
I'd love to see like a video of it like moving, because I've only ever seen images. I've never seen like a video of it. But,
yes.
To see an image of it, like a video, of it moving and like, I don't know, like looking at you if its eyes moved. Oh. So right now we will probably get into the actual creepypasta of the story, so that you guys know what we're actually talking about, because for those who aren't aware probably think, what's going on? Who is this person? What are we looking at?
Yeah, what have we gotten ourselves into? Well, you're about to find out. So without further ado, let's get right into the story.
Widely regarded as one of the most popular and widest spread creepypastas ever written, the Russian sleep experiment is notorious as much for the gruesome nature of its content as for its plausibility. To this day, a large portion of the articles written about the story are attempts to investigate its validity or to debunk it as a hoax, something that speaks not only to the story's effectiveness, but also to the deeper societal anxieties to which the story appeals.
For those who don't know, the Russian sleep experiment is a supposedly factual amount of experimentation acted out on subjects by the Soviet government and military in the wake of World War II. The experiment, meant to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on the human body, was also used to test a new gas that could keep people awake for days at a time. The report documents the degeneration of those experimented upon, individuals commonly referred to within the creepypasta community as the test subjects. The horrifying results of these experiments and the crazed, almost subhuman or demonic creatures it produces are often illustrated alongside the story, with one image in particular being representative of the entire myth. So, already, we're getting into this could be, factual kind of thing in the story, which is kind of insane.
Yeah,
right?
That's the crazy part.
So they're already trying to pass it off as, this was looked upon as factual for the longest time, which is horrifying.
Thinking of the biological ways of thinking about how this gas would work is insane, because sleep is incredibly important for the human body, as it is what we use to process every single day of our lives and basically chuck out all the old information we don't need and keep all the information we do need. So the idea that a gas should be able to do that is insane, because it would need to affect not only, making you feel well rested, but it would also neurologically need to be able to process memories without you having to sleep, which sounds crazy.
It's almost like rewriting your human code, which is the fact that anything man-made could do that is very jarring.
100%. It's a very unsettling thing to think about, that scientists would force people to stay awake for an extended period of time, which is bad anyway. Like obviously there's benefits, but it's bad. But also the biological reasoning in the gas is so complex. That is so difficult. We don't have anything close to that in this modern day of medicine. So they trying to do it back in 1947 is insane. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on but no bedding, running water, and a toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II.
Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would have been freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for the 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of the conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. So it's immediately they're kept in this cage, and they're told they're going to be free. They just have to comply, right?
Yeah, it's
that also
pretty
that, I
basic.
mean that's pretty torturous, I would say, immediately, right?
It's a basic ask,
So-
but it's an insane ask of someone.
Yeah, I mean, especially because you got to keep in mind, like, they can promise whatever they want, right? There's nothing holding them to releasing them, and I'm sure
No.
that somewhere deep down that they're aware of this. But I mean, the mental fortitude to go through with this. I mean, honestly, I would rather just be executed. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
like, staying away for 30 days.
It's
almost
insane.
unfathomable.
Yeah, it's
mean-
definitely not something that humans were meant to do. I mean, there is not a single creature on this planet that does that. Like, every living thing has a rest at some point because we need it. By fact, we are not machines that can just keep doing and doing and doing. We have to stop. Like, everybody knows what it's like to need a break.
And I mean, I'm sure a lot of you out there, working double shifts, triple shifts, staying awake, pulling all-nighters, you know what it's like to, stay awake for maybe like a couple days at max, right? And just comprehending the amount of time that they had to stay awake against their will.
Yeah.
It is crazy to think about. So that kind of idea alone gives me chills.
After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and the one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected it was an effect of the gas itself. So this is quite a common thing to happen to people when trapped in a room. There's either like a divide or like there's some sort of need to find something to trust.
It's very interesting though, because humans are social creatures. You'd think that it would maybe be the opposite.
Yeah.
But I guess whenever the need to survive is that great, people really only think of number one.
Yeah. Well, if there's no number one, there's no reason I'm thinking of anybody else, because
Absolutely.
looking after yourself was obviously the most important thing to do. So, and I think it's crazy that they're like even whispering into like the glass that's like 6 inches thick, and like they have
That's a little unsettling already.
Literally, it's crazy to think that even the people who have captured them and are experimenting on them, they still want to trust them more than the people that they're in there with, which is insane. Because like if it was me,
crazy,
I would want to trust the other prisoners. Like, we're in this together, like these people have put us here, but this gas has seemingly driven them to paranoia, or just being locked in a confined room could drive you crazy. So
yeah. You also have to remember, they're talking to the people who they think, also in reality, have all the power over them. So they think they're probably, in their mind, I would assume that they're thinking, well, they're doing this to us, they could easily undo this.
yeah, they're the ones controlling it.
That
they
battle
can stop
of will.
Mm-hmm.
After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers assumed that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it. Or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The two non-screaming captives took their butts apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones.
Now this is something would put me on edge.
That is a fuck that. Like, honestly, oh my god, that is awful. I mean, you'd think they would maybe do something to stop that, while it was happening, but I mean, if I guess if you want to see the effects, you don't want to involve yourself too much, but the thing about it is, like, I mean, to just calmly do something as disgusting as that, like, you can already tell they're really far gone, if not completely.
This is 9 days in and they're already,
and the screaming as well, like, what do you think caused that? I mean, obviously they're awake, so maybe hallucinations.
I mean, I guess so, or like just the sheer like feeling like you're going so crazy you just want to scream. And what's also clear that it's a pretty bad thing is that not only were they screaming, they screamed until they had torn their vocal cords and continued to try and scream and were just producing squeaks.
That's, oh my god, imagine how painful that has to be. Oh my god, that is, that just continues to give me chills. This story, like I said, I haven't read through all of it, and already it's just getting to me. So it's definitely a very well written story. Yeah,
it's very well written, and also to put yourself into the shoes of the experimenters. Imagine watching this happen to other people. Like,
it would be insane.
That's awful to witness these people clearly losing their minds. And then just trying to, I don't even know how to describe it. Like,
you'd have to disconnect yourself almost, to maybe look at them as cattle or something. I really don't. I don't know how else you would process this.
Yeah, that would definitely keep me up at night as an experimenter. Like, especially the moral of it being like, I've done this to these people. Like, how should I feel? Oh no.
Yeah. Definitely a feeling you would take to your grave.
Oh,
for sure.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be able to tell anyone either because it's government stuff. Like, this is something that's classified.
I don't know if I would be able to live with myself.
No, neither. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure that they were still working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives. They were afraid they were either dead or vegetables.
Wow. See, that alone, not being able to see anything is... And then, seeing that information that they're consuming enough oxygen that they would be working out really, really hard, right?
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
Yeah,
you can only imagine what they're doing in there.
Like, you can't be breathing that heavily while sitting still. I mean, you physically can, but if you do, you'll get lightheaded. Like,
yeah,
you won't feel good if you breathe like that for an extended period of time. So
yeah, and like we were saying earlier, I mean, they wanted to not interfere, but I mean, at this point, obviously, this is definitely a point I would be like, okay, to hell with the experiment. We have to see what's going on, or else we
Yeah.
won't have an experiment, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they can't see anything with the book pages seemingly stuck to the windows that they use to observe them. So to them it's, and obviously because they can't hear anything, so they can't hear or see anything, but the oxygen levels are working. It's like, right, what? Like, that's so confusing.
It's awful. Oh, just the ideas are still like, I'm still trying to get over the entire story is just, this entire idea is just crazy to me.
Yeah, this story is one of my favorites. It's so good. It's so well written. It's but like putting yourself into the position of the experimenters really like drives home the fear, I feel like, because if you were like the prisoner, you'd lose your mind, you wouldn't really notice. But imagine being like the experimenter. You're watching these people go crazy, you're having moral conflicts, but you're also like, what if these people get out? What do we do?
Then what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can they even go back to being how they were before at this point? Do they even want to?
Yeah.
So
can they be reintroduced into society again, or is like, is it a failed experiment? Like, there's so many questions that would swim in the heads of these scientists.
Absolutely. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To the surprise, they heard a single phrase and a calm voice response: "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out amongst the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber door at midnight on the 15th day.
No, thank you.
Holy
No,
fuck.
No.
Yeah, nah, fuck that. Nope. That's good. I'm
what
alright.
do you mean somebody said, "We no longer want to be freed"? What are you talking about?
That's exactly what I was talking about. Maybe they don't even want to be free. At that point, I just say burn the entire room. It's got enough gas in it. Light a match. It's over, right?
That's
Put them out of their
awful.
misery.
That's oh my
No, thank you. Right? That's
No.
awful.
That's
Oh my god. Like,
imagine
can you just
hearing that.
imagine? Just hear like a fucking voice on the other side. We don't want to be free anymore. Fuck that. All right, that can go straight back to hell where it fucking originated from, bro.
Like,
that
I
is-
would quite happily
no.
shut the door, be like, you know what? You don't want to be free? Fine, leave you there. I'm going home, back to my wife
Leave
and
you
kids.
yeah. yeah. At this point, if you're a researcher, what do you do? Like, do you? I mean, genuinely, is there a protocol for this?
I don't even think
It's
there
just
would
like,
be.
oh shit. Like,
It's like, oh, right, we've absolutely ruined these people. Well, it was fun for a little bit.
yeah,
I'm going
you can't just
home.
break fucking people like that and be like, well, I really got to get to our lunch break. Like, what the fuck? Like, Jesus Christ.
Me and Jim said we'd go and get coffee, so like we gotta bounce. Like,
yeah, we gotta go. God, bro, that is probably the worst possibility, right? That's got to be the worst case scenario. Besides, all of them dying on day 13 or some shit like that, right?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, at this point, the researchers definitely have to be concerned to the point, like, okay, maybe we're doing something wrong, right? Even if it is the enemy, this is not something that should be happening, right?
Yeah, this should
surely,
I'd assume they're testing it for like their own soldiers, for their own
Yes,
soldiers to be working.
absolutely.
So like you wouldn't want to do that to your own people.
yeah, this should have been. I think whenever they started smearing shit on the glass, that's when they should have pulled out the entire experiment. Be like, okay, we don't want to do this to our people.
Yeah,
But
why would you keep
this is-
going? That's a good point.
This is akin to torture at this point.
Like if that like okay, let's say that smearing feces on things is one of the necessary steps to be able to stay awake. Why would you even willingly go, well, yeah, we can handle that step if it means we're gonna stay awake. What do you mean? That's like socially, that's illegal. Like,
I don't who would sign up for this as well. Like, yeah, I'm gonna be one of the super soldiers that can stay awake, but you know, the only downside to that is I have to spew shit everywhere every couple hours. You know, it's one of those things. It's like, what do you mean?
Like, oh,
like, we'll send your ass on a fucking solo mission, bro. Nobody wants to be around you. What the hell?
Like, dude, you smell bad. Like. Like, who does that? Like, ew, dude.
Brother, ew.
Brother, ew. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state any of them were in life.
Oh my god. Jesus. Okay. That's just... that's kind of sad. Oh my gosh.
That is sad. Like, if you think about this, like, at the end of the day, these are people's kids. This is someone's son. This is someone's daughter. This, like, you know, these are real people.
Gosh, dude, like that. I mean, at that point, it's just I wouldn't want to. I can see why they wouldn't want to leave. I wouldn't even want to be alive. That is just awful. I mean, if they're in a state where it's genuinely like the picture we showed earlier, if they're in that state, I mean, unrecognizable as a human being, right? That is just a fate worse than death.
I mean, like, if it meant that soldiers, like fully trained soldiers who have gone in and they're screaming at what they saw, like, surely this is where you call it. Like, this is where you're like, right, you can't do that. Like, I know that insane testing, it was done in the past, and like things like this have happened, but
oh yeah,
just for it to let it to get to this point is crazy. You've got to wonder, like, has this changed someone's chemistry, like brain chemistry, or like someone's DNA, or like is this altering the enzymes in the body? Like, what's going on? Is it the neurotransmitters? Like, what has changed? And that, as a biomedical science student, that's what really interests me personally, because
it definitely would be interesting to do like an autopsy, you know, post death. You know, I mean, that it would be interesting to see what the body went through. You know,
100%. I mean, that would also help. So, say in a not very good world, but like, say if they did do the autopsy, found where the errors were, did more testing, and then made a new gas, they'd be able to make a new one that could make people stay awake, which would help them improve. But I would argue it's still not a good idea to make something like that.
The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most of, if not all of them, were self-inflicted.
See, now this really paints a fantastic image of what the prisoners actually look like, because, you know, the whole time, you know, you've got the pages on the window, you can't see, you can't hear anything from the microphones, and now that they've gone in and looked at it, you can now see that they've torn themselves apart physically with their own hands.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it takes me, you know, a lot of it takes me a lot of mental fortitude to like prick myself with a needle for like a blood draw to be able to convince yourself to rip off chunks of flesh
Yeah.
at a time.
Oof.
I mean, like, for instance, there was an incident where a man got stuck in a mountain for a few 100,000 fucking days or however many, and he actually had to cut his arm off. That alone takes a lot of mental fortitude.
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend how
Mhm.
someone could do that. I mean, obviously it's that or die, but still, I don't know if I would be able to do it. But
Yeah. I guess when
ripping that kind of stuff, like just chunks of flesh with hand, like not even teeth or
yeah, oh,
anything else,
Jesus.
is just God. Like,
Yeah, like I guess when things become that desperate, you know, the human mind and body is able to do a lot more than you think it can. But still, to reach that point of insanity or to be pushed to that point that's crazy. Like, this, all they've done is breathe in a particular gas, and yet that gas was enough to push them to the point where they, for whatever reason, have used their own fingers to pull apart their flesh, which, by the way, you'd have to be insanely strong to do that.
yeah, can we talk about how strong they are now? Like that. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, the gas may have turned them non-human at this point, but obviously it has done something to enhance some kind of either physical strength or like physical tolerance to pain.
Yeah,
Because that doesn't happen.
No, exactly. And like to paint an image, so audience, Flair included, you know, take your hand and put it on your arm and just kind of like clench your hand. You can feel that, like, how much strength would be required to pull that off of you, which is an insane amount of not only like strength but grip, because like surely like you it would slip out of your hand. Like, they're not
Absolutely.
the easiest things to pull apart, especially if we're talking like you've only using your fingers and no teeth or anything sharp.
Yeah.
To use
I mean,
blunt force.
There's that idea as well that you can, you know, basically like your pinky, right? You can kind of bite it off if you want, kind of like a baby carrot.
Yeah.
But obviously nobody's doing that.
Yeah,
because
you're like, aware.
why would you? First of all, you know, like, but you know, to get past that mental, I think a lot of their mental is gone, obviously, at this point. Because they don't have that conscience anymore, first of all, to be in the back of their mind, like, okay, you know, what's the most, because it also said they had more food, so they don't even need to actually eat them, you know, eat themselves and eat their friend that was there. So obviously they're thinking on such a low level that they can barely comprehend life, you know, and it's really scary because unfortunately some people do get to that point in real life, and it is not fun.
Yeah, definitely. It's a point of like the human psyche falling to where like you're unable to recognize things anymore. Like I don't even know if you'd be able to blame them, like the test subjects, because it's like they might not even they probably don't even know what's going on. They're not aware anymore. Like there's a point where you lose awareness around these kinds of things, and you know, like you said, you could bite a finger off like a carrot, and the only thing that stops you is like obviously your brain telling you don't do that, but also like the pain threshold, so which would imply that, you know, they don't feel pain anymore. Like their psyche has dropped that low, because pain is only felt when the brain tells you something is wrong. So when you get a cut and it hurts, it's not because the cut hurts, it's because your brain is telling you there is a problem that needs to be fixed. So this would suggest that the gases got to the mind to the point where you don't have that relay of neurons going between your head. So you don't have your brain telling you that this is wrong, which is crazy.
It is very, very nuts.
The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but many still refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fell asleep.
Damn, so they're at this point where they kind of need the gas to even be able to sustain being alive.
They're literally begging for it, and what's crazy is that even special trained Russians can't even go in to remove these people. They just outright refuse to go near them.
To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like an animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one of the doctors, when heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out, to the point where there was more air in this vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach, and just kept repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent.
That's insane. For that much morphine to go into the human body and he is still fighting.
Yeah, that's
morphine wipes you out.
I know, right? Still that to get to this point, he's almost genuinely superhuman, right?
Yeah, you've got to be some sort of feral superhuman for sure. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured out of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative that they had given him to prepare him for surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force of his own muscles that had exerted on them.
Wow. That's... jeez.
That's a big battle to put up to not go to sleep. I know they're I would assume that them being told don't sleep for 30 days and you'll go free must be something that's running through their head, and that the gas must have kind of made imperative to them.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a
only
need now.
Yeah, it's you will only live if you are awake. You'll die if you're asleep kind of attitude, which kind of explains the crazy need to fight, but it doesn't explain the strength.
Yeah.
And the need for such high levels of sedation.
You're probably gonna laugh at me for this, but it's giving Freddy Krueger vibes at this point. Like it's giving like dream demon kind of don't go to sleep kind of vibes. Like they'll do anything to not go to sleep. It's giving me kind of that, which is kind of hilarious, but also at the same time, I mean, like, can you imagine someone like, obviously there's people that are like afraid of like sedatives and everything like that, but if it was to this point where you were like actively fighting, it's almost like a tale of like drug addiction, almost. You know, it's really
definitely.
It's really interesting. That's kind of crossing those lines a little bit, but definitely terrifying between having this guy like genuinely fight off a 200-pound soldier when he's barely human looking. You know, it's terrifying.
Yeah, especially with like all of the issues that they've got with their like organs and muscles after like destroying themselves, and yet he's still able to fight off this 200-pound soldier.
The second survivor had been the first group of the 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, that they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon proceeding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of a drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting.
Why keep cutting? That's my first question.
Yeah. No thanks.
Like, this came from like a sleep experiment, and now he wants the surgeon to keep cutting into him.
That's so weird, dude. That's, oh my god, like that gave me like the heebie-jeebies, bro. I don't like that is fucking like it's almost masochistic now. It's listen,
it's excessive.
Listen, guys, I've been with a lot of freaky women in my day, but that's too much.
that's insane.
Oh my god.
The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic. Although they had been injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled.
Wow. So now at this point, the researchers are even on the side of this is wrong, and we need to just, we don't need to keep going.
Yeah, it's like this is enough. We've done enough. But obviously, this former KGB agent, commanding officer, has clearly has that same human curiosity that I'm sure everybody shares of, well, what would happen if we gave them the gas again? But everybody has that moral compass that kind of tells them, you know, don't do that because these people have literally torn themselves apart. But I can still understand why you would want to see what would happen had you given them the gas again.
In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all three stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious at this point, all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all of his might. First left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined suddenly. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of a deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped.
Whoa. So this kind of tells us that they are desperate to be sleeping. But they know they don't want to because they've been promised that freedom.
Yeah. At this point, I would say that they're beyond help if they weren't already.
Yeah.
They're already just, they're going, the second they go to sleep at this point, it's just completely over, which in my mind, it speaks to me volumes that maybe that gas has altered them so much, maybe to the point where without it, they just don't function.
Yeah, and that sleeping is death.
And that's
which is
crazy.
A point I did make earlier.
It's crazy to me that has altered them that much to the point where it's just, if you sleep, you are genuinely going to die. And it's kind of crazy to me that they can they recognize that earlier, being so what's the word I'm looking for, like crazed as they were. They were rabid, they were insane, but they still recognized that their body needed that gas to be able to function. So
to them it was very much, these people are taking away the thing I need to live, which is like, no wonder they were fighting so hard to get the gas back and like scream for it, because I know that me and you would do the same if it was for like air or food or whatever,
Exactly.
The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed the gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused and then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, "So nearly free."
And that's the end of the story. Wow. That ending is wow. That is, I mean, I don't know what I expected, honestly, but that ending is just perfect, honestly. I this entire story is gruesome, it's gritty, it's terrifying, and it pulls no punches at all. So in that, I mean, there's a lot I could say about it, but the only thing I really want to say about it is it's a great story. It's a good story. I think it definitely deserved the recognition that it got before, I think it got the right amount of attention. I think it's really well written.
100%.
And it's scary, right? That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's fucking freaky.
It's graphic, and there's people out there like fellow horror and thriller enthusiasts will know, like, gory stuff is fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really happy that we read this. I think it's
Me too.
I think it's really cool. I really did like it. It's one of the longer stories that we will cover here. It's not too long, but it's still a sit down and read kind of thing. Definitely different from what we had last time with Herobrine, and it's definitely a shift. So
it's a big jump from
if you do
graphic.
Yeah, if you do enjoy stories that are more graphic, we'll definitely put the link in the description to go read this story for yourself.
Also, if you like longer ones and you like more of us discussing the story itself, let us know, because obviously in the last one we did a lot of clips and images and things like that. I know with this one it's completely different. You can't really get clips from 1947, but if you prefer things with like clips and images more, then that's absolutely fine. If you prefer the more podcasty feel of just only having to listen, then let us know in the comments. We are very interested to hear any and all feedback. We're doing our best to improve, but I love this story. This story is very close to me as a person, as I used to tell this story all the time. What fascinated me though was like how much of the story there was. When I was younger, I would only tell the story up until about like when before the researchers would go in. Like,
oh yeah,
I think I used to say that the test subjects would die and they would find the bodies, which is a version that I used to tell, but clearly on the original it does go a lot further than that.
Yeah, I will say the one that I really heard was when the researchers actually opened the door to see everyone, that in the state they were in. For me, the story ended when they said they no longer wanted to be freed, which obviously that's just a little bit of it, which is crazy because if you think about it, I mean, this idea is so easily explored. And they did a very, very good job with making everyone feel really alive, making everyone have that sense of humanity, and especially at the end, the researcher losing his mind equally, pretty much just offing people, and finally that last little quote that read there, that was terrifying. I mean, them
100%.
stating that it's they're just us. I mean, that's whew. It's almost like
the dark parts that we don't get to see.
Exactly. It's like the darkest recesses of your mind coming to front. But yeah, so I guess that's pretty much all I've got to say about the story. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, not really. It has been a great story to read, especially to read the original, but yeah, no, that's pretty much everything I've had to say.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's I guess there's one last thing to do is rate it. So what would you give your rating on the Russian sleep experiment?
Oh, this one's really good, and I am a little biased because it used to be a good story for me, so I'm probably gonna give it maybe like a solid like Oh, I'm debating between an 8 or a 9 because it's really good, but I think I'm gonna go with a 9.
All right.
Yeah.
9 out of 10. Okay. Here's the thing: is going into this story for me, I knew little to nothing about it. Right. I knew just enough to get me interested. But I've never read the full story until today, and I think because of that, I'm gonna have to also give it a 9. So yeah, it's such a good story. It's definitely worth the time to go and read. It's definitely worth the time to go and research. I know you did a lot of research for this episode, so
yes,
I
did.
It's
Yeah,
very
it was
cool.
great.
So altogether, that's gonna be an 18 out of 20 for our final rating. So I think that's all we got to say. Links, if you want to take us out.
Yeah, so thank you guys all for listening in, watching, however you stream this. If you guys have any creepy stories that you want us to cover, drop a comment, let us know, and we will get straight into it and see if we can get it into another episode. But that being said, that is everything for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.